Not long ago, I read another online post from somebody who used to be a strong advocate for contemporary worship songs, but now they're using hymns almost exclusively. And the reason? Because of the superiority of hymns. I don't know, maybe I've just been in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I've encountered several articles like that in recent months. And honestly, I think it's time that somebody gave a different perspective. So that's what I'm going to do here today. Now, first, let me say that I am, and have been for years, a strong proponent of hymns. I remember leading worship for our Sunday service for our congregation a while back. I don't do that very often anymore, but someone came up to me afterward and said, "I loved the hymns. Thanks for including them." And I say that because I want you to know that I'm not just on an anti-hymn crusade here, okay? Now, having said that, let me give you a little bit of background. And I want to start with four of the most prolific hymn writers of all time. First, Isaac Watts. He lived during the 16 and 1700s. He composed more than 600 hymns. Second, Fanny Crosby. She lived during the 18 and early 1900s, and she claimed to have penned more than 8,000 hymns. Next up, George Matheson. He was alive during the 1800s, and we don't know exactly how many hymns he wrote, but the general consensus is that he wrote hundreds of hymns. And then Charles Wesley. He lived during the 1700s, and I read a well-documented article not long ago that said that he wrote almost 9,000 hymns. Okay, that's just four hymn writers who are greatly revered in many circles, and they have a combined body of work totaling in the neighborhood of 18,000 hymns. So think about that. If you consider that the average hymnal in America contains about 600 hymns, there seems to be something wrong there, something disproportional about that. What happened to the other 17,000 plus hymns? And that's not even to mention hundreds of other hymn writers. The fact is that no one I've ever met can name more than a handful of songs from any of those four composers that I just mentioned. They can't. Now you might think, hold on a minute, Tom, I thought they wrote hundreds, even thousands of hymns. They did. But the vast majority were not the quality of the ones that have survived through to today. Most were used for a short time and then discarded. They may even have been popular in their day, but they didn't have what was necessary to endure over the long term. So let's be honest. Do you really think it's fair to compare the entire body of modern worship songs to the few hymns that have stood the test of time? The fact is that 100 years from now, there will be a small number of songs that are being used today that will still be around. Those will have become the classics, if you will. But to say that we should throw out all modern songs because as a whole, they're not as good as the hymns that have been proven over time, to me, that's absurd. I mean, by that same logic, then, in the early 1900s, all of Fanny Crosby and George Matheson's songs should have been discarded. What a tragedy that would have been. And I would also have us consider another factor. And that's that the majority of older hymns do a great job with teaching doctrine, but they are rarely about having a true relationship with the Lord. Now, I'm always in favor of good, solid biblical doctrine. If you know anything at all about my teaching, you know that's true. But the fact is that Jesus didn't die for doctrine. He died so that people could once again be in right relationship with God. Jesus said, "I've called you friends." Many of the modern worship songs, certainly not all, but many, all right, do a far better job of expressing that relationship aspect than the hymns of old. Now, of course, some modern songs do have strong theology, and a few older hymns do have a strong relational aspect. I get that. But please hear what I'm saying. I'm not suggesting that the relational aspect of many of the newer songs makes them emphatically better. They simply serve a different, and I think necessary purpose. They allow us to express honest, heartfelt relationship with the Lord in a way that many, can I say this and not get in too much trouble, many doctrinally laden hymns don't. Here's the reality. The vast majority of the newer songs will not endure 2 or 3 generations from now. They just won't. But then neither did the vast majority of songs from previous eras. But some of those modern day songs are exactly what the church needs now. And so to jettison the songs of today as a whole, that would be like saying that we all need to use the original 1611 King James Version of the Bible and speak in Old English. And we all know why we don't do those things. It's because we live in a different culture, a different society. People think and act and talk differently than they did when Isaac Watts was writing songs. So to insist that our songs have to be from another era while not using that same argument in other areas of the church, honestly, that's creating a false dichotomy. Here's my bottom line in all of this. If you want to use hymns exclusively in your church, go ahead. Just don't insist that yours is the only right way or even the absolute best way. You know, today's songwriters are creating songs that God is using in the church today. Certainly, they're not all going to be sung by our great-grandchildren. I know that. But I really don't think we should expect them to be. Those future generations, if the Lord tarries in returning, are going to have their own hymn writers whose songs are going to be used, and then many of them will be discarded. And that's okay. Just ask Charles Wesley.
Brought to you by MyWorshipLeadingCoach.com.
Helping you to be more fully equipped as a worship leader.